Welcome to Live Courageously podcast show number 25 of 2023. And I'm your host, John Duffy, and this is the 41st Live Courageously podcast show since I started the show a year and a half ago. Live Courageously has been the conscious theme of my life for the last 3 years since the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. And it's been an unconscious theme of my life for most of my life. Courage is one of the first of human qualities because it is the quality which guarantees all others. So let's meet today's courageous guest, ALLI COVINGTON. And ALLI has been an entrepreneur in fitness since 1995 and finance since 2003. She's been a pioneer and made innovations in the fitness industry, and she's sat on advisory boards for some of the largest financial firms. She earned her undergraduate degree from UCI, where she double majored in pre-med and art history and went on to earn an MA in counseling psychology. Instead of going into private practice, she utilizes her skills and talents with her clients every day to help them get their best outcomes. She created the first group exercise weight training class and went on to write the first personal training algorithm and built software around that program that is being utilized by individuals and companies. She expanded that into a coaching program with dozens of clients getting the results that they personally desire. Some of her current affiliations are Access Elite, a company that vets the best providers in industries to give companies access to them in a single place, and Spencer Institute, the BLD certification program. ALLI is a uniquely skilled and talented woman with many years of experience training men and women to get the body they always wanted. And like I said, a master's degree in psychology. This combination has made her the best at what she does. And in the words of ALLI, your body is a machine that will do whatever you tell it to do, but it's your brain that needs coaching. That's the unique service that she provides. Psychologists aren't personal trainers, and they can't help you get in shape. And personal trainers aren't psychologists that understand the underlying issues that prevent us from reaching our goals and how to work around those issues to reach our goals anyway. In her mind, there's no excuses for not attaining a goal. So she created ways to adapt to changing needs and lifestyles while staying on track to reach the goals that you set. She's also a mom, and her journey has been a rough one, overcoming adversity and abuse and standing strong and inspiring others to not give in or not give up. So let's welcome ALLI to the show. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. That was such a beautiful introduction. I appreciate that.
Oh,
I was like, well, who is this lady that we're talking about? I want to meet her.
Well, you know, and I know from having known a little bit about you and have spoken with you, obviously, that's just a small piece of you. So, you know, I could have gone on a lot longer, but, you know, I had to kind of get to the real thing, which is to introduce you to the audience so people could get a chance to meet you personally. So I like to start out the show always, and it's, you know, not every time I've met my guests, even though most of the time I have. So my first two questions are, where did we meet? How did we meet? And then the second question is, what does Live Courageously mean to you, since that's the nature of the show?
We met at Jason Cisneros' wedding. And actually, we really got a chance to talk in the airport on the way home. Discovered that we live not that far from each other, which was amazing since we were on the East Coast and we live on the West Coast. So you don't usually see that happen. But it was a beautiful coming together of a lot of disparate people from different backgrounds, but all with a very similar heart and bent. So it was beautiful to meet you there. And I don't think it was by accident at all. I don't believe in accidents.
I agree. And, you know, it's that short period of time, and it was, you know, not that short because we waited for a little while for the plane, but,
a couple of hours.
That period of time, we got a chance to talk, and I got it, you know, because I didn't expect to hear, you know, because I love people's stories, but I didn't expect you to take me on the journey of your story and how much I learned in that short period of time. And of course, after listening to you and getting to know you that quickly, I was like, wow, you know, this is a great story you've lived, and you have a lot of lessons and messages for people to share. So that's why I wanted you on the show. So that takes you to my second question, which is, what does Live Courageously mean to you?
Living in faith rather than fear. And that's not an easy thing to do, as you know, especially when you're surrounded by nothing but what seems like a pit. You know, imagine getting dropped into a pit. Do you remember Silence of the Lambs, that movie from the 80s?
Oh, yeah.
Right? imagine being that person in the pit and just going, I don't know way, I think there's a way out because I came in here somehow, but I can't find a door. There's no light switch. I can't find my way out. And the longer I sit here, the more this starts to feel like it's the end. Like this is the way this is the way my story ends, right? And seems like the only way to really pull through that and have the courage to get out is having the faith that it's happening for a reason and that there's something better on the other side of that. And that's really kind of what helped me get through that period of time where it felt like nothing, like all I was doing was groping in the dark for a light switch.
Well, this is a quote I saw from you that you had up there: "Fear is a liar," and
It
I
is.
think I just resonated with that right away when I saw that from the stuff you sent me. But here's the thing, and I think what's I don't even call it mind-boggling, but you've lived such a successful life on so many levels, and we talk about in the bio, both fitness, some of the pictures that I put up, obviously, of you, being in contests and all this stuff. And I think sometimes you meet somebody, you see somebody, and you don't know what their story is, and you make assumptions. You assume, well, if this person is a champion bodybuilder or whatever they're great at, and you see that piece of them, you don't realize what's the struggle behind that, what's the darkness behind that. You think it's all easy, and they're just having an easy life, and you go, well, that's easy for them to say, And I think
Right.
with you, I'm the same way. I saw the positive. You're teaching fitness. You're a fitness trainer. You're incredible in that field. And then I got to hear the other side. And so, but before we get to that, I just kind of want, tell us a little bit growing up. I mean, were you always into fitness? Were you always into being that great bodybuilder that you reflect in that picture?
No, I think those kids have parents who are like that and they raise them that way, like I'm doing with my children. But no, I was a chubby kid growing up. My dad would take me skiing into the beach. My mom wasn't active at all. Just wasn't, shopping was her thing, not exercise. And because my parents had two different sets of rules around food and things like that, I really struggled with my weight until probably about 5th grade, I think, is when my mom just went, okay, I'm going to put you in drill team. And because I had these regular practices where I was moving my body and doing something, I started to see, oh, okay, life is getting a little easier. It's easier to ride my bike and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed dancing, really enjoyed all the court competitions. I am naturally kind of competitive. And then I moved into it in high school. So I finished that 5th grade year, did it all through junior high, and then tried out for the drill team in high school, made it onto the team, and spent 2 years that way. And man, I will tell you, you can outrun a bad diet because my freshman year of high school, we would practice for 2 hours a day, 3.5 on Tuesdays, and then do all our performances on Saturday. And I literally ate Doritos, Hostess cherry pies, and washed it down with a Dr. Pepper 5 days a week. I cringe at what I put in my body because I didn't know. My mom didn't know either, and she was a health teacher, but she didn't know what I was eating when I was at school. But I was still dropping weight because I was moving so much. So that's when I kind of went, oh, hang on. So this exercise thing, this is kind of this gives me the freedom to eat whatever I want. I think I like this. So when I moved out of my mom's house, moved in with my dad for the last 2 years of high school, I was deathly afraid of going back to being that chubby kid again
Mm.
because it was, you're teased so much. The identity of like being that loser that's being mistreated by all your peers because of the way you look. I was like, I don't want anything to do with that again. So I was like, Dad, I need to make sure I don't stop moving. So he got me a gym membership at his gym, which he didn't go to. and kind of coached me from the dining room table each night. How was your workout today? Well, I did some of these and some of this, and I don't know what I'm doing. So he would talk to me about these different exercises, and he just knew the basics, right? He didn't really, but he was a chemistry teacher. My mom's a health teacher, dad's a chemistry teacher. So now you're starting to see how from a very young age, I was putting the pieces together of health and biochemistry, but I didn't really get into it, into like the real education of it, until I got to college. And I was a bio major, so I got biochemistry as my undergrad.
Now,
But
would you say for yourself, sometimes they say people are driven by either pain or pleasure, or sometimes a combination of both, right? But to get in fitness, did pain drive you or did pleasure drive you? And I know for myself, I came back from school when I dropped out of school, but I eventually went back. And I came back from school, and my nephew, I had a little bit of a beer belly at the time, and he poked me in my stomach, and he said, "Hey, it's the Pillsbury Doughboy."
oh, that's a
Oh
good
my
one.
God. That was like the worst pain I ever had. And I went, first I wanted to slap him. Of course, I wasn't going to do that. But
Right.
I was like, God, you'll never call me the Pillsbury Doughboy again. And I went on a 2-week water fast. I ate no food for 2 weeks. I dropped
Oh my
20
God.
pounds. I dropped 20 pounds, and I got a job as a health instructor at a fitness club. And never was I ever going to be called a Pillsbury Doughboy ever. So he did me a great
Yeah.
favor by giving me some pain.
Yeah.
But not everybody's driven by that. Some people are driven by what they've created or
Pleasure.
what they look, right? So
Yeah,
you
no, it was definitely pain for me. I just didn't want to go back to feeling that pain again.
right.
And the older I got, the more cognizant of it I was. So then it became so much more important to do that. So it's funny that I'm telling you this now, that my dad used to coach me from the dining room table over dinner, but that was like the first remote coaching, because he never took me into the gym.
That's
I
funny.
never once worked out with my father.
That is funny.
And yet I got out of high school, went into college, and went and decided to go get a personal training certification, because it seemed like that would be more fun than waiting tables for a college job, right? I just didn't know
Sure.
I was going to be as good at it as I was, and it was going to be as fun as it was. But yeah, 93. That's the first remote training there, by the way.
Interesting. Well,
So
he kind of set you up for success in that sense, right?
he did. Yeah. I honestly never put two and two together until just now when I said that. So thanks, Dad.
Yeah, right.
But it works, right? I didn't have any videos to follow. It was just him telling me what to do and kind of what to think about it. There was no YouTube back then. There was no like,
Right.
oh, just Google how to do it. None of that stuff.
Exactly.
So yeah, yeah. And so my foray into fitness was coming from that bodybuilding style of training, because that's kind of all there was. But so I got certified in 95, and then thought, you know what, everybody needs to do this. So I started teaching group exercise classes. And about 97, 98 is when I designed, I was 20 years old. So I must have been, maybe I was 21. Anyway, must have been 97. So the first group exercise weight training class. So filtering in my head through all the potential exercises, what can we do with just the equipment in a room like that? How can we do it to keep the class flowing, and so on and so forth? And that stayed in the industry until 2013 or so, when Body Pump came out. And I remember my manager at the time said, "You need to trademark this." I was like, "I can barely put gas in my car to get to my classes.
Wow.
Trademark? I don't, an attorney? What are you talking about? I'm a starving college student."
Hmm.
So I didn't, but I thought it spoke volumes that it was popular enough that it went not only from Bally's, but it ended up over at 24-Hour Fitness. And people loved it, and they kept the name of the class and the format of the class. So that that probably gave me more hope that what I was building right now was going to have some staying power.
And that was
Really,
called, you mentioned to me, SETS, strength endurance
that,
training, correct?
that's right. Yeah.
Right. And so you
Yeah.
started that at the time. And then, you also go into school, you get 2 degrees, which,
Yeah.
most people have a hard time getting one, but, you go ahead and get two, right? And MA in psychology, but you choose not to go into the psychology field, but you combine the two, the fitness and the
Yeah.
psychology. And what are the strengths of that you bring to your training, knowing how to, understand psychology as well as fitness and combine those two. What's the strength of that you feel for you?
I'm glad you asked that question because I just had this conversation with my business partner, recorded last Friday, where we were talking about stress eating and how people manage stress through either stuffing down or sublimation. And those are psychological terms, but they really mean usually when somebody's trying to manage stress, chronic stress, usually trauma, they tend to overeat, overdrink, smoke, do drugs. Like they actually put things in their mouth and they stuff down their emotions in that process. And the emotions don't go anywhere. They don't just magically disappear. They have to come out one way or the other. And so the process of sublimation is in transferring that negative energy into a positive outcome, like using exercise, or in the case of people who are sexually frustrated, they're turning it into sales or productivity at work or becoming a volunteer to be better in their community, ways that are productive versus destructive. And I don't know a single trainer on the planet that's ever talked about stress eating in that way. And I know psychologists will probably talk about it, but they don't know what to tell the client to go do about it. Just
Right.
go exercise or go eat right. It's like, you got to kind of combine those two. And my business partner has battled with that for decades.
Hmm.
And so he was actually one of my first fitness coaching clients, or coaching clients in general, in 2020. So he started with me remotely on the east coast of Canada, and we started working through a lot of his past trauma, and that started helping him set aside those stuffing down behaviors and moving more into positive sublimating type of behaviors. And so when we recorded this bod talk on Friday, I sent it out to my mailing list, and the response I got back was tremendous. They were like, this is amazing. This is exactly what I wanted to see. Even some of my clients that watched it, we hadn't had that conversation. I didn't even know they were stress eating. They're like, you were talking to me, Allie. I went, we've been coaching. How come you're not telling me? But I think that's really common, especially for men.
And
To
how
not
much,
feel
I
like
mean,
they do that.
that's a good thing. I mean, I just think, like, you see now the rise of obesity and unhealthy obesity
Yeah.
growing in the population. And of course, there's the food component. And you talk about, like, when you were young, you were exercising and you were able to overcome because you were exercising so much.
Mhm.
But I know when I was young, I used to drink like 3 quarts of soda, and the amount of acne I had was all because of the sugar, right?
Yeah.
I'm putting poison in my system, and there's no way for the poison to get out but to come out as acne.
Yeah.
But I
That's a
didn't
gut
know that.
related issue, by the way.
What's that?
That's a gut related issue.
Yeah. So
So
you
when we
get all
get,
that poison in your system, and your system has to do something with. But so there's the eating aspect, but then, like you're saying, the stress aspect of being stressed and doing those things with it. So, you see the population growing and growing unhealthier
yeah,
because they're not being coached psychologically, and they're not being coached physically to deal with their issues that are allowing them to get unhealthier.
that's right. And no diet can untangle those knots inside your head. No online, you can't go to YouTube and find a bunch of exercises and have that untangle your knots. Untangling the knots is something that came to me recently when somebody asked me, I think it was on a podcast. I think it was Lauren, as a matter of fact, said, like, what is it that you do for people? I'm like, nah, I untangle their knots.
I
The
like
knots
that.
inside their head. Just get in there and, like, okay, well, we pull this over here, then that one it undoes that loop, and we just kind of eventually straighten it out, because there's no like set pattern or method to being able to untangle a knot, right? You just kind of get in there and you start pulling and scooping and you know getting it out, getting it untangled. So that's what I do that's different for my coaching clients. Yeah,
Now,
so
you
it's
said you
permanent
started,
change.
say it again.
So it's permanent change. My
Permanent change.
goal for my
Absolutely.
coaching clients is, this is the last program you're ever going to be on, because this one will work for you and sustainable for the rest of your life, because we're going to solve the root problem.
Well, I think that's great, and we'll come back at the end when you talk more about your program and what people can learn from it. But it's like you said, it isn't about a quick diet. It isn't about just quick exercise. This is a lifelong commitment to health as opposed to unhealth. And
Right.
it's like you said, untying the knots, um, changing how you eat, changing how you exercise, changing how you live life, so
Yeah.
that it's not like I'm going to do this for a month. No, this is a lifetime. This
Yeah.
is how you live a good lifetime, by doing the right things for the rest of your life, right? And that's
Right.
kind of what your program's putting out there. So that's
Yeah.
very, very cool. Now, you said you started in well, you didn't start, but in 2020 you started doing some of the online coaching. And what was your experience, if anything, special? Because for a lot of people, unfortunately, at least I found during 2020 in the pandemic, a lot of people were driven away from doing the healthy things. They were driven out of the gyms by the gyms closing down. They were driven out of going outside in the sun and getting sun. They would,
Mhm.
began to overeat because of isolation, and all those social, psychological issues started getting worse. And so instead of getting healthier, they became unhealthier. So 2 years drove a lot of people into even worse health as opposed to better health. And
Yeah.
so now people are trying to overcome that, at least some people, and hopefully more. But I think, that's something I noticed. And I'm not sure if you noticed that in your practice.
Oh, absolutely. But what I noticed more than anything, other than like, okay, now this pandemic is exacerbating their already existing bad habits, is that it pushed people to the point of enough pain that they actually wanted to get better as a result of it. And health was the big topic of 2020. Now, mind you, most of it was about a virus and vaccines and all of that. But at the end of the day, they were thinking about their health more than they ever had been. They were taking steps toward their health than they ever had been. And because it was now top of mind, I think they took it a lot more seriously than they ever had been. And
Interesting.
so I honestly feel like the pandemic did us a favor in that way, as much as it did us a disservice. And even as recently as last year, I still had people coming to me saying, I still put on a bunch of weight during COVID. I need to take it off. I haven't heard that in 23, but 22, that was still the theme. So
Right.
it's lasted quite a while for a number of people, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, I was lucky because I know when the gyms opened up, I was the minute they opened, I was in there, and I was like, okay,
Oh,
I'm going to go 7 days a week. So I just took it to the next level, which was, I'm going to go in the opposite direction, and take this as an opportunity to do
mhm.
what, like you said, to get into the best health of my life, the best fitness of my life. Here's a chance. Let's go and let's do it.
Yes,
And so
exactly.
I think that's kind of what we need to encourage people throughout life to do, and that's what you're doing with
Absolutely.
your program, in
Yeah.
particular. But let's pivot, if you
Okay.
don't mind,
Absolutely.
but before I pivot, I'm just gonna throw up some pictures, because this is the fitness side of you in all your aspects of working out, in the gym, just to give people of how important it is, and what it looks like. And these are just some of the images of all that. So that's kind of the fitness world that you've created through your own practices, and then your coaching and training.
Mhm.
But in the middle of that, you would assume that everything's easy, right? You had an easy life, didn't you?
You
Um,
would think it looking from the outside, yeah.
yeah, but you didn't.
Mm.
You had a rather challenging experience. Both, you're a mom of two kids. You've dealt with issues that nobody should have to deal with, and both domestic abuse issues, and all kinds of struggles in custody, and then financial issues and survival, just trying to survive. All of that in the midst of you still trying to move forward. So, if you
Yeah,
don't mind, and you want to share a little bit of that story with the audience,
yeah.
I think people would learn how sometimes life can throw everything bad at you, and you still got to find a way to fight through it. And your life explains that.
Yeah. So those pictures that you just showed, a couple of them were done in October of 2017. And that was it was 2 weeks before I got pregnant with my third. And it was while I was in the beginning stages of dating the father of my third child. And we were in a relationship and everything seemed to be going great and all of that. And to fast forward through the impetus of how everything started to go downhill, my ex-husband had a reaction to me moving on, and needless to say, we ended back in court in 2018, and everything started to spiral out of control there. So I'm pregnant and in a custody battle. And now we're going to do a 7:30 evaluation, which is where a forensic psychologist comes in and evaluates every person in the family. And I didn't have any qualms about it because I was like, cool, I like this stuff. Let's go. but but everything started to fall apart because she started evaluating my he's now my ex, not my ex-husband, my ex-boyfriend, whom I never married, thankfully. And things started kind of going downhill pretty quickly. My two older kids were struggling and they didn't know what to do about it. And so I'm pregnant.
How old were they at the time?
At the time, my son was just turning 7 and my daughter was going to be 11.
Mm.
So she was like 10 and a half. And they were with me because they had said they didn't want to be with their dad. So they were with me and my boyfriend, and I'm pregnant, and we're trying to make a go of all of this. And he started getting more and more assertive, more and more aggressive.
Mm.
And there was a big struggle for me in that, because I knew, like, we don't need aggression here, but we also need leadership. And he didn't know how to do one without the other. And the psychologist said she was not supposed to evaluate him, but she did anyway. And so she recommended the judge that for in the interim that the kids go over to their dad, whom they had said that they were afraid of being with. So my heart was breaking, but his fist came at me at that point. So they
Oof.
never saw any of it, but the first slap came right after they were sent to their dads. I often wonder if it ever would have happened if they hadn't been sent over there. But there's no point in wondering about that for too long, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so there was an incident. He slapped me, and I was like, "You don't do that to me." I slapped him back, but he's 6'5"
Oof.
and 360 pounds, and I'm 5'5", you know.
Big difference.
So he basically just grabbed me by the shoulders, picked me up off the floor, and walked me into the shower room, right? Where it's just a toilet and a shower and the door shuts. It's not a big bathroom. And he shut the door, locked it, and basically locked me in there for about an hour and a half while he screamed at me and punched the wall and, told me what an awful person I am. And, you can imagine the stuff. Right before I was going to go do a presentation for a bunch of real estate agents on how to best manage their money and where to save it. Yeah.
Wow.
So I pulled my head around, forgot all about that for the moment, went and did my presentation, and thought, how the heck am I going to get out of this? And I'm pregnant. So what are my options now? And it just escalated more and more. Eventually my son was born, but I was induced 2 weeks early because we had gotten into another argument before. Not a fight, not a physical fight, but he was always arguing with me, always yelling at me, always making me, come back and beg for forgiveness. And that had happened the morning of a typical follow-up, prior to delivery. And my blood pressure was so high, they were afraid I was going to have a stroke. So they induced me. But beforehand, we're in there, and this is like and all of a sudden you go in for a regular exam. Oh, we're sending you over to the maternity ward. We've got to monitor you. And he's just like, cool, I'm going to go get something to eat. I'll be back in an hour or something like that. And during that period, I was happy he left, honestly, because the nurse started asking me questions because she noticed, and she said, Are you afraid? Yes, I am. Yes. So it's my first opportunity to be away from him and tell somebody who could do something to help me. And um, scary, because they were like, okay, we're going to bring in a social worker. And the social worker wanted me to figure out how to devise a plan to get out.
Mm,
Like, I'm trying to have a baby here, and you want
wow.
me to make a decision about his future with his other parent. And I'm trying, I can't do this all at the same time. Right. It was just like, it's not happening. But a social worker was great. It was like, I can't lie. I can't just come up with a lie. I'm not a good liar. So we came up with a plan that didn't include me lying and included taking some type of step so that they would release me and the baby from the hospital to him and go home. And it did work. It worked eventually, but ultimately I needed to call the police myself, because the therapist recommendation, going to see a therapist, that didn't do anything. The therapist didn't call anybody. So she was, I guess her hands were tied. But anyway, kind of fast forwarding through it, got to the point where my son was about 2.5 months old. It was October 12th when he really went to town, but didn't leave enough of a mark for me
Mm,
to call the police. So I endured it, but 5 days later he did it again, and he did leave enough of a mark. So I thought, I don't know how many more of these I can do. I want to I want to die right now. I wanted to quit in July. It's October, and I've been enduring all of this, and the only thing that kept me from quitting and killing myself, because I didn't feel like there was any way out, was my older kids. And I knew that if I did that, then they would live the rest of their lives thinking, why wasn't I enough for mom to stay?
mm,
Why
mm.
wasn't she enough for her to fight for us?
Wow.
So I didn't, and I endured, and I just kind of kept going like, okay, God, please, if I'm supposed to be here, please let something happen that makes it easy to get out and get custody. And honestly, hitting me probably was the easiest way for me to get out and get custody. Sorry, it's still a little emotional
Oh
when I
yeah,
go back into those memories and think about it. I'm
exactly.
like, you know, um, but, um, but that, in hindsight, it was like that was the easy way, because I didn't have to battle him in court for years on end. So what happened is really amazing, though, and this is where where my point of like having faith instead of fear to move forward comes in, because I called the police. They gave me a restraining order, but it's only a 5-day restraining order. One of my clients who lived in another state flew me and the baby out, and she was a therapist. So she kind of like, I spent 11 days there just decompressing and getting my feet underneath me, but having somebody help take care of the baby while I did it. And because I knew I was struggling already. And then I came home and filed for a more permanent restraining order, which they only give you like a 3-week restraining order. And then you've got to go into court. You've got to show up, and you've got to tell the judge why you want a restraining order in front of him,
Yeah.
so he can question you and call you a liar and twist all your words around and say, no, that's not how it happened, and all of that. Well, I missed it. I showed up to the courthouse with my friend who was there to support me, and I sat outside, but I didn't know I was supposed to go in and check in. So they called my name, but I wasn't there. So they completely dismissed it, and the restraining order was off. So I
Uh,
had to hurry up and file it all over again. Okay, now I know the process. Nobody told me. Thanks a lot. And so now that this time has passed, right? And now, because I put in my statement that there were medical records that demonstrated the chiropractor that he and I both saw together, I went to see him to get everything put back in place, because my jaw was a little bit out of alignment, and my neck and so on, and my whole body. And he said, yeah, I can tell from your injuries that what you're telling me is true. So I put it in my notes, in my request to the court, like, there's medical evidence that says that I'm telling the truth, and I have reason to be afraid for my safety and that of my son. Please give me a restraining order. Well, his criminal attorney, right, because I called the police and he spent the night in jail, his criminal attorney picked up that case too. And she started demanding my medical records, mine and the baby. And I was like, oh, great. So now all of my medical records are going to be part for the court to see, the attorneys to see. So I started freaking out, and I just got quiet and just kept praying, like, okay, just tell me what to do. Please, God, tell me what to do, because I do not know what I'm doing, but I am trying to survive here. And this is still 2018 and maybe beginning of 2019 at this point.
Wow.
And mind you, I'm on monitored visits with my older children. I only get to see them for 4 hours every 2 weeks.
Wow.
And that cost me $50 an hour. And I have an infant that I can't put in childcare. And I work as a financial planner. I have to go see clients. How am I going to do that with an infant, with this condition that I'm in, with all that I'm dealing with? So money was draining there's a whooshing sound out of my bank account. And literally everything I had saved was spent during 2018 and 19, and then everything I could borrow too. So right around March of 2019, the judge in the case with my kids said, we're going to trial. There's no way. And mom, you had better have some long legs to get back just to 50-50 custody, because he's basically saying, I'm not giving you these children. You're a hot mess. And I'm going, I'm not a hot mess, I swear. It's just, I'm in a pit of despair at this point. I'm trying to get out of it. And so in May, I sought another attorney because I didn't know what to do about this other case. And I'm praying and I'm listening to the answer. And the answer came, well, tell them what's in your medical records from delivery and from your 6-week postpartum visit, because that has doctor's notes, SOAP notes is what they call them, has doctor's notes about about the domestic violence. And so what the courts do in California is, or at least where I live, they let you write a very private, confidential victim statement, and you can write as many of them as you want. So I had written one before, but now I wrote an updated one, and I told them what date to go look at in my medical records to get the evidence. And that must have been enough for the DA to get a conviction, because he just pled guilty at that point.
Wow.
Stopped screwing around, pled guilty in September. Mind you, the whole summer, I find out in June that my son has infantile spasms, and that's why instead of progressing, he's regressed. Wow. So he's 6 months, can't hold his head up, right? In January, can't hold his head up, can't roll over anymore, which he used to do. And I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with my son while I'm on monitored visits with my older kids, while I'm in 2 custody battles, while I'm seeing 2 therapists to try to overcome this trauma. And then my son is diagnosed with this very bleak future, saying that because infantile spasms is a form of epilepsy that causes regression, like regress development. So he was moving backwards, and usually is caused by a genetic syndrome that means that, like, your genes are constantly fighting you and they're kicking off these seizures, or it's caused by birth trauma, which was my son's case. So I found out the day after my ex pled guilty that my son also did not have the genetic syndrome. And that's when I went, all right, God's got me. Okay. So we've got a guilty verdict here. I'm going to get my restraining order, which means my ex-husband can't blame all of this on me anymore. So I'm taking bullets out of his gun, and my son's going to be okay. But that whole summer, he had to undergo a very intense treatment for the seizures, which had him hospitalized for 5 days at the beginning because the treatment is so nasty that it can cause seizures itself, and it also causes a lot of other horrible side effects that can be permanent. So the more of that treatment that he would have to have, the worse his future is going to be. So talk about a lot of prayer and a lot of, please let this all be okay. That's pressure. I don't know. I can honestly say I worked 4 jobs, went to school, carried a full load. I never experienced anything that was like this in my life. And I hope to God I never do, because that was intense.
Well, just, I wanted to, I'm sorry to have you go through all that, and because it's so hard, and
Right.
reliving it. But it's like when I met you at the airport. I saw a person there that I could never have imagined any of this on any level, right? And know what kind of battles that you went through and how dark it got for you
Yeah.
before you were able to get these victories and overcome it. But I think that's the lesson too for people watching. Sometimes when
Yes.
we meet people, not having the time to kind of figure out what somebody's story is, or be there with some compassion for somebody, we just assume things, and a lot of those things could be totally wrong, or maybe
Yep.
all wrong. So
Right.
it's like taking the time to really understand each other and have that. And for me, just to, what you went through is so, like you said, you don't want to ever go through this again, but nobody should have to go through this. I mean, it's just not like,
Totally
but
true.
keep going from there, kind of. And then I'm going to ask you a couple questions on the lesson learned, but then I want to kind of take you into where you are today, so we don't end on the
Yeah.
painful stuff, because I want us to get into all the really great things that you're doing today too. So keep going.
Absolutely. No, so the point to really getting into the detail of all of it is so that other people can understand the intense pressure and the intense stress. I mean, during that summer, I filed for, actually, it was probably in April. I filed for food stamps because I didn't have enough money to feed myself and my baby. I didn't want my older kids to know I was struggling financially, so I tried to make everything seem like it was completely normal on the outside. And I could do that for 4 hours at a time. But even the monitors, who I couldn't always pay on time, knew, and they weren't supposed to be so kind to me, but they could tell that I wasn't the problem. And so they were like, we feel for this woman. She got dealt a load of crap. Well, let's at least, I can be here. I can show up. I can do this. She'll pay me eventually. And I did. I made good on all of my debts to them. And what I what I got from all of that, and the reason to tell all of that story, is for 2 reasons. One, if you're going through anything kind of like it, just know you can make it through, right? Like,
Mm,
that's a pretty intense, horrible thing to get through, because it almost felt like the 2 exes were conspiring
sure.
with each other against me to try to, like, just get me out of the picture so that they could have my children.
Well, in practice, yeah,
At
yeah,
least is what it felt like. I was
sure.
looking at it like, how in the world is all of this like converging on me all at once without people like communicating? And the other part is so that the story of what's happening now has more impact, and the lessons learned from it are amazing. So that summer was a pretty rough one. And so we fast forwarded, right? We got through all of that. We got to the trial in January of 2020, and we walked in, and the judge just went, "We're not doing a trial. You're going back to 50-50. You need to go
Right on.
just figure out a settlement agreement, come back on Friday, and whoever doesn't agree is the one who's going to pay for the trial." So we
Wow.
had a lot of incentive to get it done. And that's when I went, okay, okay, God had me the whole way through. And so then it was just about rebuilding all of my relationship with my older kids, getting them to trust me again, that they could trust their mom not to make a mistake, because God only knew what was going through, what they were being fed for 19 months. And so we spent a lot of time together rebuilding that. And then the pandemic hit, and that actually turned into a really good thing for my family too, because the only thing we could go do together was go to the beach.
Mm,
And so, by the way, I did get the permanent restraining order. So
excellent.
got that. It was a 3-year restraining order. I just had to renew it last October. And so now I have a permanent one. So I have sole legal, sole physical custody of my little guy. He's been in physical therapy since he was 6 months old. So he's working on walking still, and he's turning 5 in a couple of weeks. So he's still very, very far behind his age group and where he should be. And he is definitely special needs. And I do not know what the future is going to hold for him. But I do know that he's a blessing. And I can't wait to see how he turns out. He's probably one of, if you meet him, you can't help but fall in love with him
Wow.
because he's so sweet and so special. And he doesn't look like he's got any kind of delay at all, but you can tell when he starts to try to walk, and the fact that he doesn't talk to you or feed himself, you're like, oh, okay. So he's still not feeding himself. He's almost 5. So I've been spoon feeding a baby for 5 years, mind you. I'm like, you can eat anytime now. We can, this is getting kind of old, but I have the best therapists working with him, and I'm very blessed. So he's a completely different level of joy and lesson.
Well, like you said earlier, when we met, it wasn't an accident, but I mean, talk about courageous and living courageous. I mean, what you went through, your faith, your courage, your will, not giving up, you're taking action, you're still trying to move forward, and then being such a loving and powerful mom to your kids and doing all that, and doing all you're doing in the, career wise, and then trying to inspire other people on top of that while you're dealing with all that. I mean, I just think when people, sometimes people have challenges and they're not that extreme. And, it just, when people realize what people can go through and overcome, like you said, don't give up, overcome, it just gives people hope. And I think your story is one of definitely hope for people, on every level, and hopefully not necessarily people have to go through the darkness that you went through, but on any level, having the courage, having the hope, willing to do whatever it takes and never give up. You got that, you really do. So I was honored that I got a chance to meet you and that you were willing to be that open to share your story with me and now share it here. So, I mean,
I'm actually really excited to share it. I would love it to be a book or a movie or something that would inspire some hope in people at some point, because there's what really bothered me more than probably anything else that I went through was sitting in that courtroom, and half of the cases were domestic violence cases.
Yeah.
Half. And that was one courtroom on one floor in one courthouse in one flippin' county in the entire country. And there's so much of it going on and I know that there's so much more that's going on that isn't being brought to the courthouses.
Sure.
And I know because the victim doesn't feel like they can get out, and they feel completely trapped. And I would love for them to at least get some ray of hope from my story, that as hard as it is and as scary as it is, and as much as you feel like you could absolutely die, you need to leave.
Well, we talked briefly before we did the show about that, and for anybody who hasn't experienced abuse, whether it's a female being abused by a man or even a man being abused by a female, even though it's more the first version than the second, even, but they both happen. But as you were telling me, it's just people who've never experienced just think it's easy. Like, well, why don't you get out?
Right.
Yeah, no, it's, on every level, if it was that easy, everybody would just get out.
Right.
It's not that easy.
It's like telling an obese person, just eat less.
Yeah.
Stop eating cookies.
Right. So not understanding what it takes and what that person's experiencing and what they need, the kind of support and encouragement and all around everything to help them to get to that place of strength to make that move. And you found that you did it, but yes, your message and your story is that. So once again, I am thankful for you sharing it with us, for sure.
Yeah, no problem. I'm actually glad it happened. I got to the point where it turned out to be a blessing, because what ended up happening as a result of it was, yes, I got my kids back. I did find out how strong I really am. I did find my faith again, because when you're at rock bottom, and people talk about rock bottom and you're going like, that sounds pretty bad. Oh, Oh, you don't know rock bottom until you've actually hit it. And you're like, dang, this is the bottom.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's a long way up. Oh, but it's a lot of perspective, right? It gives you a lot of gratitude for not being there. So one of the things that I did was I kept a gratitude journal because I knew I needed to keep my head straight. Another thing I did was I made sure I worked out as soon as I could get the baby into childcare at the gym. I at least did cardio because it was the only thing that was going to keep me from, I couldn't get off the couch. I was
Mm,
depressed. I
right.
was super depressed. But I also knew because of my training that if I stay that way, I'm just going to be that way more. So I made myself get up and I at least did cardio to get the dopamine going. And I feel like that, and I stayed away from sugar and processed carbs, processed food entirely so that my brain could function as well as it could. Right? When you're going
Well,
through trauma and you're dealing with trauma, your head is really fuzzy. And you don't need to add to it with poor nutrients and lack of dopamine and things like that. So I did those things as much as I didn't want to. I did them anyway because it's like I'm taking my own medicine. But what ended up happening is here we get to 2020, the pandemic happens, and no one is going to do any financial planning when they don't know if they're going to have a paycheck tomorrow. So I was like, well, I do have this other fitness business here. I guess I'll just do this, right? And
well,
my first remote client on the East Coast of Canada ends up being a software developer.
ah, so
And
let's pivot to that. I'm gonna throw up a couple of your quotes because we're gonna finish up the show, and I want to kind of make sure you share a little bit about what you do. But here's a couple of quotes from you. Don't be afraid to start over. This time, you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. I love that because
yeah,
right? Ain't that the truth?
it is. And we always feel like, oh, I'm just starting over again. It's like, no, no, you're starting from a much better place. You cannot. And this is what I kept telling my daughter because she was so worried that it would happen again. I said, it can't possibly happen again because now we know too much. So when you're starting over with experience, now you're a lot wiser. You're not going to make the same mistakes. You'll make new ones, but they won't be like that again. And I've
Absolutely.
kept that promise to her. And now we're in a much better place. So this software developer loved what I was doing, loved the way I train and my meal plans and all of that stuff, and said, I can make it better. Can I invest? Can I be your
Wow.
business partner? And I was like, yes, I've been wanting a technical co-founder since I first thought of this in 2009.
Ah,
Right. And you just couldn't find one. And the technology wasn't there to do what I wanted to do. I mean, like Facebook didn't even have videos in 2009. So I had no idea how I was going to market it back then, but the idea was there. Anyway, but I was running my business, I was having babies. And so it was just something I was, chunking down a little bit at a time. But here comes COVID and telling us, here you go, you can have a great online business. And then I came to find out, okay, so online training's been a thing for a hot minute. People have been trying to do this for a little while. COVID just made people have to look at it because now they couldn't go to the trainer at the gym. That was completely out of the question. So
right.
how do I get fit and stay fit without doing that? Well, enter online training. And so he rebuilt it, got the clients from 2020 onto the new platform in February of 21, took off from there, and now we're redoing it again and doing an alpha launch next month. And I'm super excited about how this is going to look because we're adding in gamification and AI and all kinds of cool stuff. Since I've been coaching for the last couple of years now, I understand a lot more about what needs to be in the technology in order to continue helping people move forward. So the AI part of it is going to be a very deeply psychological help tool that's going to help people in a much more meaningful way than I ever could have before without it. So it's going to be really, really
And
exciting.
when you release that out for in a month, do you have a name? Is it already named the program? Do you have a name for it?
It is. It's the LeanBot app. Bod
Lean
is
bot,
my company and
lean
LeanBot
bot
is
app.
the
Okay.
app. Yeah, Bod by Ali Coaching is what my coaching clients get to take advantage of right now. And they've been using the app so far. We've been using that to get feedback.
And explain before the alpha comes out, but even what you've been doing so far with the online coaching. What is that? What is online coaching? I mean, I'm sure there's some people who use it, some people don't. What exactly does it look like? What are they provided with? How does that work?
Well, what we do is through our app, we're delivering their customized workouts, unlimited amount, their custom macro calculations and nutrition package, all of my recipes that are already pre-calculated out and easy to make. And then me as the coach. So I check in with my clients every day. How are we doing? Because I want to know if you're on track or off track. If you're off track, I don't want to wait a week to find out. I want to know now. Right. So I can fix it and we can get you back on track now, not when you're 10 feet off track, but when you're like one step off track. Right. And so that has been super powerful for them. I've helped people lose more than 100 pounds, my business partner being the first one, but multiple clients who had more than 100 pounds to lose. We've done it all remotely, never needed me to be in the gym with them, because when we do our coaching calls, we get the chance to have more meaningful conversations about nutrition, biochemistry, psychology, stress eating, all of that stuff, like untangling the knots that caused the overeating to begin with, like we started off talking at the beginning of this conversation. So that stuff I couldn't do when I meet them in the gym because they're huffing and puffing going through their workout. It was one of my frustrations when I used to meet people in the gym back in the day.
Well, I know myself. I watch it sometimes. I go to Gold's Gym in Venice, and I see some of the personal trainers, and I'm not going to say all of them are like this or not, but I see them go around with their clients, and they're just the client sits on a machine and they count for the client, and then the client gets up and sits on another machine and they count for the client, and I'm going, is that all they got offering? Is that how to count? Because I'm sure the client knows how to count by themselves, but it's so limited. And for what you're offering, obviously, is a lot more elaborate, a lot more intense, and gets into a lot more stuff than just walking around with somebody going, okay, let's count to 10 as you do 10 reps. Mm-hmm. I mean, it just seems not worth the price that they're paying.
It's not. It's not now.
Right?
Back then, in the 90s, that was all there was, and that was what we did.
Yeah.
But now I get I get such better results now than I ever did meeting them in the gym, because now I can discuss everything. I can give them a custom supplement package. I can give them the psychological stuff that they really, really need in order to make long-term success sustainable, and not just going from one program to another program to another program and going, gosh, I just can't find the one that works for me.
Right.
They all work for you. The problem is you need your trainer to be your therapist and your therapist to be your trainer, and they're just not.
And people need both. And so that's kind of what you're doing. So how to, obviously, when it comes alpha, I'll share it for you as well. How do people reach you now? What's the way to connect with you? What's your contact information?
I would love it if your listeners, your watchers would email me, alli@bodcompany.com, ALLI.
Let me see if I can is this it at the bottom of it? It's hard to see, but
that's my Twitter handle, Alli Covington.
Right.
But they can, if they go to alli@bodcompany.com and email me John Duffy or the name of your podcast, just something that tells me that this is where they got my email and got in contact with me, so I know you're not on my mailing list and things like that, I will give you a free consultation. I will listen to whatever you want to talk about and give you the best guidance I can in how to move forward, whether that's with me or in a completely different vein.
But say that one more time, Alli.
At bod, BOD, company.com. Email me and I will give you a free 30-minute consultation.
Let me see.
And some of my one-on-one clients, because I have 2 tiers of coaching, some of my one-on-one clients are Alli at. That's an Alli too.
I made a typo there. Anyway, it's alli@bodcompany.com. Okay, excellent.
Because I have all this financial background and all this psychological background and whatnot, a lot of my clients come to me and they go, okay, well, I want to get fit, but I also have all this other stuff I want to do too. So I will do some financial planning for them. These are my one-on-one clients. I'll do some, some business consulting type of stuff for them too, which is fun because I'm building a startup. I'm actively engaged in the business of building a business, just like a lot of you. So for all the founders out there that are thinking, oh, well, I'll wait on my health to start my company. Don't do that. You need to get with me now because I can make this a lot more profitable and a lot easier for you.
Well, Allie, that's come to the end of this. Thank you so much. Allie at bodcompany.com. Thank you for being part of the show, and thank you for sharing everything you did. And when you do your outfit thing, let me know and I'll share it as well.
I will. I absolutely will. I'll send you a link for a free trial and you can share it with everyone.
Sounds great. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure having this conversation with you.
Thank you, John. It was a pleasure being here. I appreciate you.
I'll back at you. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too.